So, another book just came out. Yay! Yeah. And this was printed, we self-published. So we're, looks like we're kind of in the process of going towards establishing a printing press at the Abbey with the number of things. No, you're not happy? it's it's acknowledging all your work that you've done. Yeah. Okay. So this one is called The Key of Compassion. Subtitle is Finding Meaning Where You Least Expect It. And the cover was designed by our friend Tracy Thrasher. So it's a prison, you know, what do you call it? What? A cell block. It's a prison cell block, and out of the bars of one of the prisons is a whole explosion of golden flowers. Okay, so the last thing you would expect in a prison made of concrete. So here, what we're talking about, it's not that the flowers are growing from concrete. It's compassion is growing in the hearts of people who are imprisoned, who, as the subtitle says, finding meaning where you least expect it, where you would least expect people identifying with compassion. But they do. And that's what's so amazing about the prison work we do here. By the way, I wrote the book, but I put the book together. It has a lot of the writings of the inmates themselves. Yeah. Uh, yeah, I just did a short introduction, and then you have their writings. Yeah. But it really is showing that when you, when society can approach people not with vindictiveness, not with wanting to punish, but with an attitude of trying to help and rehabilitate people, you can get good results from it. Yeah. And even when society isn't approaching the people like that, there is something in those human beings that is like these golden flowers that just go pooh, yeah. And some of the guys that I've worked with have experienced the most awful things growing up, you know. And I read what, because when I write to them, I would ask them, tell me about your life. And I would hear about their backgrounds. And I thought, oh my God, how, no wonder they wind up in prison. When you experience those kinds of things as a kid, to have a positive view of yourself, of other people, to even have a vision of what you can become that is different than what people in your impoverished neighborhood have lived through. It's really astounding, yeah. And so that's one of the things that's been so touching for me in the prison work is how much the guys teach me and how many of my stereotypical, uh, assumptions about prisoners are being shattered. Yes, there's guys in there that are tough. Yes, there's people who are angry. Yeah, but, and there's also people who are really changing things in their life. And it's really inspiring to see that. But it's also makes me, think about the conditions that I've seen in some of those prisons. So I thought just to tell you a little bit of what I've seen. And by the way, when I would go in, because sometimes I would see individuals, and sometimes speak to Buddhist groups. And people always say to me, are you scared? Are you scared? You're a woman going in alone to a man's prison, and they're all criminals. Criminals, aren't you scared? And no, I'm not scared, because when you go in as a volunteer, the guys are so happy to see you. Yeah, they love when volunteers come and lead groups or just visit them, something that acknowledges their humanity. And of course, when I go in, I treat people like I treat everybody else, in a respectful, courteous way, which is very often how they're not used to being treated. Yeah, when you read some of the things about what the guards do, then you understand why there's sometimes violence in the prison. Yeah, because what inmates do, how they're treated by guards and so forth. But okay, here's some of the things that I saw that also made me think, yeah, about how we as a society treat others, and how I, as an individual, view others and create assumptions by them through what I see. Okay, so one thing, I was walking down a corridor in the prison, going to probably the visitors' room, and I passed by on this side. There's a cage, probably about 1 meter squared. Yeah, tall, maybe 8, 9 feet tall. Inside, there's a human being inside a cage, like you would see at a zoo. When you go to a zoo, what do you see? Lions and tigers and bears, ho ho, behind in cages. Yeah, here's a human being in a cage. That just, whoa, shocked me. How can we do that? So I smiled at him, yeah, and at the same time, my stomach turned over about seeing that. Okay, so another thing I saw. Oh yeah, I remember this incident. I went in and I was, to do a personal meeting with somebody. And so sometimes when you go in, there's a whole series of just little compartments with plexiglass in front of you, petitions on each side, and a telephone. And on the opposite side of the glass, there's a human being who is incarcerated there, who, comes in shackled, hands, feet shackled, and they stand there, and you're watching, and their hands get unlocked so that they can sit down, and you start to have a conversation. You're only sitting like a foot from each other, but there's this glass in between. So you have to talk with a phone. You're on a phone, they're on a phone. Okay. And uh, in the course of this particular conversation, yeah, the man, when we were talking, he said, "See that board on your left? Behind it is a window looking into the execution room. There was an execution there a few days ago." It's like, I'm sitting within a few feet of where somebody was legally murdered. Yeah. Again, turn my stomach, really. Um, yeah. Okay. So then another one. I was walking across a yard because they do have yard space out there. It depends on your class of confinement, how often you're allowed to go into the yard. Um, okay, but this one was an open field with short grass, no plants in sight. Yeah, because if you have plants, then they could hide contraband under the plants. So what you mostly see is cinder block, or in this case, there was a very low cut lawn. Okay, so I see men walking, lifting weights, playing basketball. And then I saw a dog. And I saw another dog. Yeah. And what is going on here? So when I finally get to the group where I'm going to speak, I asked them, and at this prison, they have a dog training program. And so the guys, the men, um, get little puppies and they are training the dogs to be rescue dogs, to be, um, help dogs for people who are elderly or who have PTSD. And it's an amazing program when the guys tell me about it because they, they're starved for some kind of emotional connection with other living people when they're in prison. And it's hard to have that with the other men because other people are very guarded. You have to be quite guarded in that situation. But with the dogs have, you know, un, un, everything, total devotion for the guys who are training them. Yeah. So here are these guys, who are just in love with their dogs, training them to be service dogs. And it's so good for them, emotionally. And it establishes peace, more peaceful environment in the prison. Yeah. And one of the inmates who did this dog training in prison, when he got out, he told me that that's what he wanted to do, to earn a living. Yeah, so he learned some skills in that way too, and it's really quite beautiful to see. Okay, let's see. Okay, so then another time I went in. This one actually was at Airway Heights, and several years ago, and talked with the group there. And there had been one man who, had come very often to the group, and he wasn't there that day. And we asked, what happened? Where is he? Because it's not like he went on vacation or. Well, he was in the infirmary. He was sick or he injured. Something had happened. Yeah. And so we asked uh, uh, if we could go visit him because he was going to be in the infirmary for several more weeks. But prison policy is that neither volunteers nor other prisoners can visit him. And we were there, It would have, I think, really helped his recovery. They wouldn't allow us to go in. So he sat there for all that time, without being able to talk to other people or have that connection that is so valuable to human beings. Okay, so I could go on and on. Yeah. I've also given refuge and precepts in prison, which is really a wonderful thing to do, and to watch people who have killed other people take the precept not to kill, to watch people who are now branded sexual predators to take a precept not to have unwise and unkind sexual behavior. So it's quite rewarding, when the guys get to that point in their understanding of Buddhism that they want to take these precepts. They realize that they have to change and they want to change. Yeah. Okay, so that's just a little bit. There's how many pages? Oh, 306 pages of stories and, things like that. So my purpose in writing the book was first to give voice to the inmates, because most of society doesn't know anything about what goes on in prisons or about the people who are incarcerated there. We just basically have the thing, they're convicted, you throw them in prison, uh, and lock them up and throw away the key. And that's not what's going on. There's human beings in there with potential. So I wanted to give them a voice. And I also wanted very much for people on the outside to have some understanding of the lives of the people on the inside, and especially what they thought, what they experienced in prison. Okay, and yeah. So next time I do a BBC on this, I'm not sure what day. Tomorrow? Okay, then I'll read some of the entries from some of the guys. And by the way, it's mostly been men. Very few women. I think I've corresponded with one woman, and I just got a letter from one woman. Yeah. Um, but it's, first of all, statistically, there's many more men incarcerated than women. But also, it seems women have better social networks. So even when they're locked up, they're in charge. They're in contact with their families, with their parents, with their kids. And they're even among the women who are incarcerated themselves. They share and they talk, whereas many of the men. Uh, I know one guy, he's been incarcerated. He's 70 something, and he did his crime when he was 19. He's been incarcerated since. And he has no contact with his family. The family just doesn't write. So he doesn't write. And, so that makes a huge difference in people's lives. If you have contact with people on the outside, you're part of society, and there's a family, and there's people who care about you. Yeah. And that's really important for people, um, who are incarcerated, so that they can get a vision of what they do after they're released. Yeah. Okay. So to be continued. So the book, yeah, I should tell you how to get the book. It's on Amazon, right? Okay. The Key of Compassion, Finding Meaning Where You Least Expect It by Bhikshuni Thubten Chodron. Okay, so it's on Amazon, and also we have copies here. What? Coming soon. Coming soon to your local monastery. Copies of the book about incarcerated people. Yeah. On the bestseller list of a list that hasn't been established yet. Okay.